Okay. Welcome everybody to Live Wire. Today's program we're going to have the Mvskoke Creek Nation Attorney General Roger Wiley. He's going to be talking to us about some legislation that went through the council at their May 22nd session. And we might touch on some other topics. If you are a citizen, you have a question for the AG, we'll try to ask it into, just put it in the YouTube chat. We'll try to ask it, see if we can get an answer. That being said, thank you so much, AG Wiley, for coming in to this live wire. And I'm just going to dive right in and start off with, on May 22nd, the National Council overrode a veto from Chief Hill concerning NCA 21-045, which appears to give councilmen the ability to request personnel documents and other documents directly from department heads. My first question would be, were you involved in the crafting of this legislation in any way, or did you have any input when it was being going through committees and things?
Well, I was provided a copy of it and was asked if I had any issues with it. And the issue I had was with, I think it was section 9104D originally, which provided that no records were confidential. And so I suggested an amendment to that at the BF&J meeting to eliminate that paragraph, and it was eliminated at the meeting. There was a mix-up, and somehow the wrong legislation that left 104D in the 9104D in the legislation that was sent over by the council to the chief's office for signature when it should not have included that provision. My understanding is 9104D has been since eliminated and the correct version of the bill has been signed into law. So that was most of my involvement with that legislation.
Well, and just for the audience, currently how you would check to see, and this is a topic we might touch on in a few minutes, but how you would check to see what code is out there is you could go to the creeksupremecourt.com, which has the Creek Nation Code and the Constitution on it. They have not updated their code page yet, just to give you a heads up, Mr. Wiley, that with this particular law. So if they've actually changed that section D we were just talking about, if it's been changed, I don't know for sure, because the veto override copy of legislation that went through the council on the 22nd session had that section in it, just to give everybody a heads up. So we don't know for sure what they have or haven't done because it hasn't been officially published anywhere yet. But there are also some concerns in Chief's veto message. Were you involved in the crafting of Chief's veto message that he submitted?
No, I was not.
Chief's veto message also outlines that the National Council's investigatory powers were limited, and he's referencing Ellis versus National Council SC 05-03/05. He says that the NCA 07-191 recognized that the National Council's investigatory powers were limited to validly issued subpoenas, and the law also provided due process protections to employees and citizens recognized, and the principal chief and second chief were immune from the law due to executive privilege. Would you agree that those things would hold for 21-045?
No, and I don't. No. Well, I don't understand your question.
Well, my question is in Chief's veto message, he says that after the Supreme Court case Ellis versus National Council, right? There were a series of NCAs that were passed to try to remedy the situation that occurred in that case. And one of the things that passed, the NCA 07-191, basically said that the National Council has a method that if they want to get information that they can use, which is they can subpoena people to their investigatory committees or any committees and have them come in and give their testimony, right?
Right.
And then it also, that particular NCA also said that there should be due process for any employees and citizens that should, and really that should go without saying, they should have due process in their if they're going to be requested to give testimony. And then principal chief and second chief are exempted from any of that due to executive privilege, like the federal government idea of executive privilege, where the executive can say there is certain information that happened while I was doing my duty, and I can't give that to you, right? If that makes sense. So with the passing of NCA 21-045, though, does executive privilege apply to that, right? What in NCA 21-045 protects the due process of citizens? Or I guess my question is kind of, why was this law, what do you think is the purpose of this law for the council? Why did they need this? Why did they need more than a subpoena is my question.
Yeah. Well, okay, we'll start. First, I think it was a bit of a cry into the wilderness for help, because I think the council believes its request, its legitimate request for records, was not being addressed. Now, the part about the subpoenas, and I'm reading directly from the chief's veto message, NCA 07191 recognized that the National Council's investigatory powers were limited to validly issued subpoenas, and I disagree with that. I don't think it is limited to validly issued subpoenas. And let's think about that. We are running a dysfunctional government if we require one branch to get a subpoena before it can obtain simple records from another branch. Say there's a financial document, or there's a question about how much a vendor is charging. Why would we have to go to court and get a subpoena to get that information? I believe this government should function in a more cooperative manner where subpoenas are not necessary. I don't believe the Ellis case requires subpoenas. And I think the tone of the Ellis case is cooperation and balance among branches of the government. So as far as the subpoenas go, I couldn't disagree more that you have to have a subpoena to get records from one branch to the other, chief from executive, or executive to legislative, or vice versa. So anyway,
as devil's advocate on that particular argument, what if we had a scenario where a councilman went to a department head, or you know, what the individuals dictated in NCA 21-045, and they said, for instance, I want a particular employee's employment records, right? Like, give those to me. Would that be violating the employee's due process or their privacy requirements or anything like that? And could that happen under NCA 21-045?
Well, you know, sure, it could happen under NCA 21-045. The due process protections, I think, in that legislation are provided for in the penalty provision. 9104G says that the same penalties referenced in FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, shall be applicable, and that has some provisions for due process under FOIA. So, and if there's a problem with that form of due process, then FOIA has a problem with its form of due process as well. Any law can be pushed to an extreme, and you can act in an unconstitutional way under that law. That always has to be recognized. So, you know, it can be taken to its extreme to answer that question. Hopefully it will not. Hopefully the two branches will cooperate, and records will freely be exchanged as needed for legitimate purposes.
I see. So, Chief's veto message declares that, in the executive's opinion, that it's an unconstitutional law. I guess another follow-up question to that would be, you know, is this going to be challenged in district court? Are you going to be going into district court over this law and trying to get, or going to the Creek Nation Supreme Court to get a determination on whether this is unconstitutional? Isn't that how the process would work in this situation? Is that if the principal chief believes that a law is unconstitutional, they've override his veto, he should go to the Supreme Court then, right, and have the Supreme Court do their interpretation? Am I correct in that?
Yeah, well, you could do that and ask for what's called a declaratory judgment, where you have a question and you want the court to determine the right answer for it. Normally, though, you have to have a case in controversy. You have to have a party that's aggrieved because, say, the council comes to them and requests records that should not be released or are confidential, and they try to put pressure on that employee or that particular branch of government and try to impose some sort of punishment. That would create a case in controversy. Ideally, you want to have a case where there are issues, potential punishment, and you would ask the court to decide that. Now, but you're right. The chief's office could take it to the they take it to the district court first for a declaratory judgment, asking the court to declare whether it is constitutional or not.
Okay. I don't know if you're aware, because I was assuming that you would have been involved in the veto message, but so the veto was overridden in May 22nd. On May 24th, Principal Chief sent out a memorandum to all cabinet members and executive branch employees, and it's in the video description link for the audience if you guys want to take a look at it. Basically, the gist of the memorandum, and I'm going to read the last paragraph that was highlighted by the Chief's office. It says, as a result, NCA 21-045 will not be enforced or recognized as valid law by the executive branch. All cabinet members and executive branch employees are to respond to information requests from the National Council members in accordance with previously established executive employment policy on legislative branch requests for information/correspondence. Section 503 of the Human Resource Policy and Procedure Manual. Are you familiar with this memorandum?
I've read that memo, yes.
What is your opinion of the memo, and were you consulted on it? Did you have any input on it?
No, I did not. Well, I'm concerned about that memo. I think anytime an elected official asks someone not to follow the law, that's a problem, and the law hasn't been set aside as unconstitutional. So yeah, I do have a problem with that approach. It should have been challenged if the claim is that it's unconstitutional. And here's my second problem with it. I mentioned a while ago that the punishment for the Records Act, as I call it, it's the NCA 21-042 045 that we're referring to. Mm-hmm. As I said earlier, it relates any civil penalties referenced in Freedom of Information Act shall be applicable to this act. And one of the provisions for penalties in FOIA is G, any elected or appointed official or any exempt employee who orders or otherwise directs an employee of the nation to violate the provisions of this act shall be subject to a fine, and it goes on. That's the danger. I don't think anybody should be telling someone not to follow the law, and until it's been challenged and set aside.
Yeah, the memorandum kind of creates a situation where the decision making on that particular process has to happen for the employee who's approached with the request, right? Because their boss is telling them don't honor this request, and there's, just like you pointed out, there's civil penalties if they don't honor it. And then so how do we get out of out of this situation is because now you've got employees are going to have to make a determination on what pick your poison.
I know, and that's unfortunate. And what I see is two branches of government clashing, and the employees being stuck in the middle, and that's not good for the employees. They need their jobs. They don't want to put themselves in a situation where they could lose their job because they think they're following the law or because they're doing what their supervisor told them to do. Yeah. This needs to be worked out. We need some sort of meeting to freely exchange documents between the executive and legislative branches so we can pass laws and enforce laws and make sure that we are operating our government in a cooperative and functional manner. Because, right now we're under a lot of pressure and a lot of people are watching us, my office in particular, for law enforcement and prosecution. And, that has to take top priority. And
absolutely,
we need to act in a manner that is reflective of strong government. And when we fight, we're not acting in the right way.
Yeah.
And so I feel badly about the position it's put the employees in. Yeah. And I think something needs to give here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you bring up another point about, and I'm assuming you're referencing the caseload from McGirt, the McGirt decision. Yes. I just wanted to check in with you. Is your office getting everything you need? How is the process going? Is everything flowing through the courts? What's your, if you could give the citizens just kind of a status update on the caseload?
Well, the caseload is tremendous. It's we calculate that we filed over 1,800 criminal charges since McGirt was decided July of last year. We don't always get the records we need. Sometimes the jail logs are slow and the booking sheets are slow to get to us. And those are important because we need to make sure that someone has their appearance and bond is set right away so they don't sit in jail. We're working a lot of these things out. This is new for everyone. It's new for the other tribes too, who've had similar rulings since then. We're going through some growing pains, but like I said about the two branches of government, we've got to cooperate, and they've got to the counties have to cooperate with us, and we've got to cooperate with them, because it's all in the best interest of public safety. We're all sworn. Our sworn duty is to protect public safety. That goes for law enforcement officers. Courts are sworn to give fair trials to anyone who's charged with a crime. And, we can't do this unless we work well with the counties and the cities and the federal government. So, I think we're doing pretty well. It's a tremendous amount of work that we've undertaken, and it costs a lot of money. And we're going to have to look at jails. We're spending a lot of money on our jail agreements with the other counties. So we'll have to consider whether we want to build a jail or build a juvenile facility for juvenile lawbreakers. These are kids who commit serious felonies, who you can't just send back home to their parents. Mm-hmm. We have to have special, jail accommodations for them. Those are all issues we need to work out. It's similar to the saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. We just work it out as we go. Yeah. And I'm proud of our crew here. I think they've done a tremendous job.
We've got some questions that have popped into the chat. I just want to try to go through them. Sure. The first question is, what is the status of the Kailiji/Bruner casino case? I know that and this is some time ago for the audience, right before the previous chief election, there was further charges filed against Mr. Bruner in the court about conspiracy. Do you have a status update on that, or maybe what your office is there's going to be any pursuit of that, or where are we at with that?
Well, that case, there was a mediation conference between the parties. They had some issues with us that they were taking to court, and of course we had issues with them. We ended up resolving everything based on a unified resolution. We dismissed the charges based on issues we had with evidence, and they in turn made agreements with us not to pursue any civil litigation, and the case, it was time to move on from that case. We did not have the type of evidence we needed based on some issues that I'd really rather not talk about, but that case has been resolved and dismissed.
Okay.
That's where we are.
Well, and for the audience, if you go back in our coverage, you can see some of the issues with the evidence that AG Wiley is talking about. The next question from the chat would be, does the Oklahoma Turnpike Authority actually have the authority to impose tolls on Mvskoke citizens for their travel on such roadways inside the reservation boundaries?
Well, again, like everything else I've said up to this point, until a court determines otherwise, yes, you do. And I pay my fees and, toll my pike pass fees too. So unless the court tells you otherwise, and they're not going to let you cross that highway or use the turnpike, I should say, if you don't pay them. So as it now stands, yes, we do have to pay those turnpike fees.
Okay, we got another question. Are you willing to discuss Article 2 of the 1866 treaty?
And what is our, we've got litigation pending on that.
Okay, all right. We've got litigation pending on that, so we are not.
And I think anybody can read it for themselves, and it says plainly what it says, and that's why we take the stand we take, because we are enforcing the terms of that treaty.
Right. Okay. One more question. What are your thoughts about the recent announcement made stating that the Mvskoke Nation will begin discussions about about freedmen's citizenship? How do you see your office participating in that process? Just for the audience who might not know, there was a news program, I think it was Channel 6 or Channel 8 locally, that had did a segment about I believe it was close to the anniversary of the Tulsa Race Massacre, about the freedmen issue with various tribes, and it got quotes from various tribes, and the quote they got from the Mvskoke Creek Nation was along those lines, that we're working to resolve this issue or something. Do you have anything to add to that, sir?
No, I don't have anything to add, and I would leave that up to the chief's office, because they made those comments, and so
Okay.
Anything to follow up on that should come from the chief's office.
We have a follow-up question on the tolls. How would a citizen challenge the tolls? Could they challenge them in court?
Sure, you could take them to court and say I shouldn't pay any turnpike fees because I'm a Creek citizen and this is located exclusively in Creek land. I'm trying to think. I guess the Mvskoke Turnpike would be exclusively within the Creek Nation, but I know the Indian Nation's Turnpike is not. Turner is not. So I guess that would be where your challenge will likely come from. If I'm correct about Mvskoke, and actually it goes into the Cherokee Nation as well. So
Yeah.
Interesting questions, interesting fact questions there. But
Yep.
It could be challenged the same, as any other law.
Well, I think we've caught up there on the questions in the chat. I have one more thing I'd like to talk to you, or two more things. And we kind of talked about this before we started streaming, but recently Representative Scott was censured and expelled from the council and fined $40,000, etc. Mvskoke Media, at the time that press release was released by the council announcing that, we sent a request to the Speaker of the National Council trying to find out what was he charged with, what caused this, what happened. Basically, any information we could get about the situation, and we haven't received any response as of yet, and it's been a few weeks. Were you involved in that process, the investigatory hearing committee of that, or like, do you know anything about that situation at all?
Well, I was not involved in the investigatory process, excuse me. I do know something about it. The question is, can an officer of the nation do business with the nation? And of course, that's covered by our law. And I was asked, to review the law, but I did not participate in the hearings for fact-finding or internal affairs.
Okay. And then my final thing for today, because we're getting close to the 30-minute mark. So we were talking earlier about NCA 21-045 and how there were amendments done in the BF and J Committee, Business, Finance, and Justice Committee, that apparently did not make it to Chief's desk, and that's partially what resulted in the veto, right? And you were saying that you had been told that was going to be remedied. And so we run into this problem of if you're a citizen or you're a news gatherer like me, where can you go to get the official code? And I don't know if you're aware, sir, but in 2016, the council actually passed NCA 16-027. And what that did was it transferred the responsibilities for codification of the nation's laws under Title 30, Section 104. That Title 30, Section 104 is where it says that the National Council will make a committee that will be responsible for codification of the laws and publishing of the laws, right? They transferred all of that section's responsibilities to the Attorney General's office. So technically right now, and this, I don't believe that this has been amended. This happened, I believe it was Attorney General Dillinger was in when this happened, but at the time we did a news story on it because we asked him, and he said they were going to make a searchable database. The AG's office I'm referring to is going to make a searchable database. It never materialized. Were you aware that you're supposed to be publishing the code?
Yeah, I am. And, yeah.
Where are we at on that? Is that going to happen? Because just for me, and I know for other citizens who are interested in the legal stuff that happens at the tribe, it's like because the Supreme Court isn't required by code to publish it, they don't have to keep up on it, so it's like in situations like this, I'd like to know what's been codified, and we don't know. So any information you have about that?
Yeah, I'd like to know what's codified too, and that's the problem. I was aware of the legislation you speak of, and Kevin Dillinger was the AG at the time, and since I've been here, it's been all gaming compact lawsuits and McGirt. And I'm not making excuses. I'm just telling you my focus has been elsewhere. I'd like to see, we need desperately to update our code in the worst way. I think to answer your earlier part of that question, how would you find out? what's in the code or not. One way would be to call the council clerks and ask them for the most updated version of the code. And I think you could do that on 21045.
Okay.
They sent me a copy of the page that had been updated, removing 104D or 109.4D. So you could probably get that from them. But we need to update our codes in the worst way. And I think I would like to see that legislation addressed and perhaps let the Supreme Court deal with the codification issue.
I see. Okay.
Because quite frankly, I don't have the time to attend to it.
Yeah,
right
and
now.
absolutely.
And it's a massive undertaking.
It is. And it's something that even here in-house, we try to do as much as we can, because for us, an important thing to have for the reporters that are going to do basically any type of legislative coverage or legal coverage is to have something you could go into the code and search it, because I was compiling it myself by getting the PDFs from the Supreme Court and putting them all into one document. It's like at 800 pages or something at where we are now. It's thick. So,
huge.
but, so that's good to hear. And any legislators that are listening, there's the AG saying we need to fix that problem. So, it does raise an interesting question, and we're almost out. Oh wait, let me look at the chat. We have another question. Let me see here. Do you think allottees who are criminally abused and exploited should receive reparations? Oh, sorry. He does a correction here. Descendants. He apologizes. He says, "I mean descendants."
Allottees. Do I think they should be paid for reparations? Well, I'm a descendant of 2 allottees, so of course I'm for it. But I don't know that would ever be accomplished.
We got one more question. Can the tribe seek justice on behalf of these families under public nuisance laws? Well, I would ask a clarification on that because I'm not familiar. Do you know what that?
I don't know what they're talking about. I'm not sure I'd have an answer for that one.
I would ask that T.Y. Prohl, if you could clarify that before we get off the air, just what you mean by that, because I don't understand how seek justice under public nuisance laws. What exactly you're going for there? Just refine that. If you can get it in, we're about to wrap. It doesn't. The 21-045 does raise an interesting question for me too, though, because and I'm assuming everything you were told was true, is that there was an amendment that was made to the law, right? And then, but the wrong version of the legislation got to Chief's desk, and then Chief does a veto based on what he has in front of him, and then they veto override that. So wouldn't they need to do a whole new legislation to amend all that process? Because the wrong thing has gone all the way through the process. Would that be safe to say, or?
Well, I wondered about that too, but there's a provision in the law and in the rules that if you have clerical errors, I think they're attributing it to that.
I see.
And so because of that, they're saying that they could just replace the inaccurate version with the correct version, and
I see.
That's what they're basing it on. I was interested in how that would be corrected as well.
Okay.
I was wondering if they would amend it and take that part out, but they're doing it by a clerical error.
Gotcha. So, as far as you know, just before we're almost out of time, as far as you haven't been in contact with Chief's office if he's going to bring this into district court or anything like that. He hasn't notified you.
No, I'm not.
And then I wanted to say just before we got off, I appreciate all your hard work, sir. I know that because of all of the new cases that are coming in through the justice system, you guys are getting slammed, and I hope to see you again in the future. One of the things that I was trying to do with this particular stream is to try to get something out there for citizens who maybe can't get the legal opinion of the tribe all the time because of, just like you were saying, the disagreements between branches, etc. And if you're interested, I'd like to reach out to you maybe once every 2 months or every month or so. We could have a discussion about some of the legislations that's gone through that's related to what you're doing, and we could do this again sometime. And again, I appreciate you coming in today.
Okay, well, thank you for having me, Jared. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. And that's going to do it for Livewire today. I'm going to make sure there's no more questions. I don't see any more. And we're going to have another one another live wire in a couple of weeks. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys later. Hold on, AG. Let me just go turn the stream off.
Sure.